Hey, assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is your brother, Preacher Moss, the host of the ShOUT Show. I want to welcome you back to another episode. For those who are just coming for the first time, thank you. And for those who are coming back, I want to thank you for your continued support. This is a really interesting show I'm trying to do. Of course, it's during the month of Ramadan, but one of the features of Ramadan is breaking down the 10 days, 10 days for this, 10 days for that, 10 days for this. Very, very mathematical, if you will, schematic, if you will. And one of the 10 days is based on forgiveness. And I will be honest, man, I've been going through Ramadan. Assalamu alaikum, big sister. How are you? Shout out to you. I've been going through Ramadan, and it's been, you know, a challenge for myself, just like everybody else. I don't feel special, but I took a call, essentially on Night of Power, from a brother who, when I say brother, like I treat him like a brother, loved him like a brother. We went through the fire together. I won't say any names, but love this brother. And we had just falling out, and so I took a call this morning, probably a couple hours, maybe an hour or so, hour and a half before Fajr, and we hashed out a lot of things that we have fallen out over, disagreed with, and it comes during the month of Ramadan, of course. But it gave me this concept for this show about celebrating forgiveness. Like, why don't we celebrate forgiveness? We celebrate the wins, we lament the losses, but somewhere in between the advent of human growth and human dynamics and truth and life, we don't really talk about forgiveness. When I say I had this call this morning, it's a very emotional call. It's like we have these falling outs in our families. There are some people in our family we're blood brothers and sisters, but we don't talk anymore. I remember my dad. I was talking to my dad about forgiveness, and he was like, I was trying to give him the Muslim perspective, and he's like, "I'm not here to tell you, boy." And now I know, people have called him like, "Cliff, I'm dying." He'd be like, "Hey, man, look, call me when you're dead." And I know that sounds horrible, but it summarizes a lot of times the feeling we have when we've been hurt, or we feel like people have put us through a particular type of trauma, or we feel like our trust has been betrayed. And I thought about this, that we don't really celebrate forgiveness. And I was like, why don't we? Why isn't, there has to be, it's so close. And I realized a lot of times we don't celebrate forgiveness because it's a very personal thing. Nobody really, really wants to know exactly what you went through. And those who do know what you went through, it does make that process a lot more difficult, because more people are looking at another person's imperfections or another person's shortcomings. And that's honest. It's really, really honest. Because we're in the age now, politicians don't apologize. They call it the double down. People don't apologize, they double down. And I'm like, wow, where is that coming from? It's almost the art of not apologizing is what we're dealing with politics. Let me welcome some more people to the show. Brother Jihad, black man. That's right, brother. My brother. Thank you so much for coming. Wake up, Salam. Big brother Nuri from Cool in the Gang. Thank you for tuning in, Nuri. Always appreciate your support. But I think all of us here have gone through a situation where you've either had to forgive somebody or you have to ask forgiveness. And when I think about it, it's a very deep concept, because when you ask somebody's forgiveness, and maybe that's one of the problems with people actually sincerely asking for forgiveness. That's a process. That's a real process. Like, if you're a religious person, there's two parts to forgiveness. One is repentance. You repent to God. That's between you and God. But the other part, the difficult part, is redemption. You have to go to that person. You have to admit whatever the situation is, the problem is, you hash it out, and you have to sincerely, in your mind, say, I really want to make that situation or that person whole again, which is realistically almost impossible to do. Because you don't know exactly what the person went through. They can't categorize every emotion, every bad feeling. You can't do that. So I think, the idea of forgiveness is a misnomer for a lot of people because it stops with, I'm sorry. Well, I didn't mean it. You good. We don't even say you good. And I think looking at the world, and it also comes while I'm writing this paper for my class, believe it or not, on, I do go to school. I've had to write this paper on the Sunni Shia conflict, which ironically to me is an exercise in people not forgiving one another, arguing over the principles or the schematics of succession to the detriment of the people that you're trying to serve. If you take the idea of the African American community here in the United States or Black Islam here in the United States, it's interesting because we didn't have those rubrics of Sunni Shia. What we had was a religion that had to be applicable to the ordinary things in life that they were dealing with back in the 1920s. They were dealing with racism. They were dealing with issues of education. They were dealing with, employment. They were dealing with social mobility issues. And I really, really understand now, particularly how the idea of Black Islam in America grew. They grew from the Ahmadiyya in the 20s to the Nation of Islam. And if I could say this without it coming off wrong, they didn't wait for an apology from white America. That apology still hasn't come, by the way, but they didn't wait for it. There's a wisdom that says that apology is not coming. And here in the United States, we never really, particularly African Americans, you never really have celebrated forgiveness because you haven't seen it. In our own communities, we do have that space, but I'm talking about as a general application of mercy, a general application of patience. It just hasn't been there. And I'm going to shout out my little brother here. Yes, forgive me for all my shortcomings. We say that during Ramadan. It's like man, thank you, Ahmed. I appreciate it. I don't know why people say that. When people say that, I think, forgive me for my shortcomings. I don't know your shortcomings. How can I know all your shortcomings? You know your shortcomings. Man, I don't want to know your shortcomings because I don't want your shortcomings to be my shortcomings. Okay, I'm being a little facetious here. But it's to make a point. The call I had today addressed certain things. And it addressed not just what happened toward me or what I felt was done towards me. I found that it really, really hurt because this person was in pain. And because of that bridge, I couldn't help them. I could not help them. This may not be, this is probably the perfect format, man. I have to ask forgiveness every day from my time when I was a teacher. My first year teaching in Milwaukee, and I'm going to tell you guys, it was a disaster. They didn't teach us. They didn't really give us behavior management or how to run a classroom. They just gave us the kids, pencils, paper, and construction paper. And they gave us the toughest kids in the school system. And these kids were dealing with abject failure. And no one apologized to them. And here you are in the classroom. And you're dealing with these kids and their emotions, And it was very tough to be a teacher. It was extremely tough to be a teacher. And a first year teacher at that. And there was one student, and I'm going to say his name. His name was Jeremy Clark. He's a young black man, good looking young black kid, green eyes, smart as a whip, but devilish. I mean, don't put your coffee down around this kid, he might spit in. But in that, I realized that he was dealing with a lot of pain and not being understood and being underrepresented in the education field. And he and I would clash. He was the leader of that classroom. Literally, it's like how the classroom would go is how Jeremy went. And I remember one day we had a spill out into the street. And I mean, it was serious. And he called me names. He cussed me out. I'll be honest. I called him names. I cussed him out. And I'm just keeping it very real with you, man. We went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And, you know, we sat down. I asked this kid to forgive me. I said, you know, I'm older than you. You're elementary school. You're fifth grade. You got up underneath my skin. I said, that's not any excuse. I'm going to forgive. I'm going to ask you for your forgiveness, and I'm going to try and do better. And the kid said, yeah, I understand, Mr. Moss. I said, no, you don't understand. I said, that's not my character. I came here to be a teacher to help. He says, no, I understand, Mr. Moss. He goes, I pushed you. And then he asked for my forgiveness. Now, this is a fifth grade kid asking for your forgiveness. Long story short, man, I always try to track my students. I don't do it. But Jeremy was a kid that always, you know, in my heart, when you, like your first classroom, your first year teacher, you remember all your students. And ironically, I looked him up. I Googled him. You know, I went through this whole process. And I was like, the best case scenario is he pops up on Facebook with a picture of his kids and he's fat and his hair's falling out. You know, that's a funny picture for me. But as that best case scenario didn't come, I kept digging. I was like, what's the worst case scenario? And the worst case scenario is that Jeremy was locked in Waupun Correctional Facility in Wisconsin, and he was doing 32 years. 32 years. And the ironic part was, for you guys that remember when I talked about teaching my first year before, the kids found out I was Muslim during Ramadan. And Fontaine and two of the kids, Fontaine and Jeremy, tried to calm the class down because they knew I wasn't eating or drinking anything. They tried to be good. That's what I'm saying. May Allah bless them. What happened, 32, you know, he's a grown man now. He's doing 32 years in prison. I wind up finding out his condition, what he's doing, because I find a letter from him looking for a pen pal. Some kind of fellowship, companionship, while he's incarcerated, and he's Muslim. Wallahi. And he's Muslim. So in that way, I'm like, I'm all back. I'm all, you know, man, forgive me again, because I'm going back to, what did I do different? I couldn't stop what he did as an adult. But for that space when he was a child, I still hold responsibility. And I told him I'll have that for years. And, you know, he probably said, Mr. Marsh, you're crazy. I'm like, no, that's real. Now, sometimes we do move around on this whole idea of forgiveness because it's empty. I think one of the reasons we don't really celebrate forgiveness is that it's empty. That people just say it. It's what you're supposed to do in that situation. It's what you're supposed to say to make other people feel good about a situation. Let's be honest, they don't feel good. They don't feel good. And the reason they don't feel good is because it took you to come back and address your behavior about what happened. There's always a time, you know, there's always a space, and things happen in between. And you don't know what people go through emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. And I find that these days, to get around that idea of forgiveness a little bit more, is that I try to be a little bit more diligent in checking on people and making sure they're okay. So Brother Jeremy, he may never see this, but if he does, he had to know that he was on my heart. He had to know that I was thinking of him. And just little things, practices of forgiveness. My mom is someone I love without a doubt. And we all love our moms, but we do dumb stuff with our parents, you know, and then we lament them when they're gone. But we do dumb stuff with our parents. We say the weirdest things to our parents. Sometimes I'll be on the phone with my mom, and my mom's on a tangent, brother. My mom, Mary Moss, will go on a tangent. I mean, one day we were talking about Elijah Muhammad, and then 5 minutes later she was talking about how many bananas do you think a monkey could eat in an hour? I'm like, where's the balance in this conversation? And I said something like, is this for real? And it hurt my mom. And I didn't realize, you know, at 74 and 75 and 76 years old, the amount of energy it takes for our parents to have conversations with us. This is a physical undertaking. Like, they are exhibiting or exerting energy that they need for their own lives to find out about their own kids. And I'm like, this is real. And so I ask my mom every day. I say, first, number one, if I said anything, I apologize. Let me just say I apologize. I'm not saying forgive me. Let me say I apologize. If it's something deeper, then I'm gonna ask for forgiveness. My mother said that's cool. We can rock with that. Hey, Sister Hayne, thank you so much for coming. What's up, bud? Haven't seen you since California. Good to see you. Good to see you. Oh, there's Queen Zakina Mujahid. Thank you very much for coming. But this whole idea of forgiveness is, for me, when it's not addressed correctly, it seems that it's become an illness. I have seen people break down, not from quote unquote bipolar, not from depression. It is the fact that at a certain level, these things added to that. So the depression was real, but now it becomes a much deeper depression. Or, the melancholy is real, but it's much more deeper. And I find sometimes it is that absence of conversation to say, hey, this is what's going on. This is how I felt. This is how you made me feel. And the weird part is, the way the world works, people don't want to stand in front of you. My dad used to call it the dress down. Like, when I was a kid, my father, when it got, I did something stupid, it'd be the dress down. This is when he would get in his car. You'd be playing basketball. You'd be playing basketball. You see your father's car come down the road into the park. You see all the gravel and the dust. And he opened the door. He peeped the horn. And he said, "Get you over here." And all the other kids were like, "Hey, man, we see you later." Because every kid knew about the dress down. You knew it was going to happen. You weren't going to stay there on the basketball court. When your father said, "Get your," you knew it was business. And you would tell cats, hey, just when you finish playing basketball, you didn't want them laughing. When you finish playing basketball, bring the ball past my house. That was real talk. That's it. If I'm living, bring the basketball past my house. And my father would dress me down. And this is something, this is probably another topic. I don't want to go into a conversation about toxic masculinity, because that's a big word these days, particularly with Black males, toxic masculinity. But my father would dress me down in the way his father would dress him down. And it wasn't the prettiest of things. And all my dad wanted was a meaningful apology. And while I gave him a meaningful apology, it came with a warning. That warning was, this is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. And I believe in my heart of hearts, when we forgive people, forgive them. But you have to be stern in your approach and look at them and let them know what you did was not acceptable then. It's not acceptable now, and it won't be acceptable in the future. Then, now, in the future. I've lost a lot of friends. At 53 years old, I realized I've lost a lot of friends because in some things, I wasn't approachable. There's certain things you couldn't bring to me. I would say there's certain things you couldn't make okay. I'll be honest. There's some things that to me were haram. You couldn't make them halal. Okay. And I'm not a perfect person, but what I am is I'm a person that tries to treat people with equity and justice and fairness and compassion. So when that is broken, I feel like I don't have a connection with people. And I've always felt that way until today. Call it Ramadan, call it a whole lot of things, call it getting older. But I was looking to hear from this person, and I was looking to hear from a number of years. When I say looking to hear, I would see a person in the same room and wait to have a conversation. Because if you force the conversation when somebody's not ready to forgive or have that conversation, it just creates more and more negative feelings and more negative history. That's what I've learned. So what I learned also is when people come to you with a sincere attempt to forgive, sincere, you have to let them do that. because you have to realize that a patience process has happened. Meaning, when I say patience, like they've had to be patient and you've had to be patient, and you have to sit. And you may not hear some things; it may not come out the way you want to. But I realize now, even more so, is that when people are trying to get themselves right with you, it comes from a conversation they've been trying to get themselves right with God. Which one is more important? I'll give it to God. I'll sit down and I'll shut up. Let me give a little shout out. What's up, Baller PC, man? Thank you so much for coming off of Twitter. We appreciate you, sir. Hope to have you back. But I'd like to marinate a little bit. The next time someone says, I'm sorry, do they ask for forgiveness? Sorry is like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What are you sorry for? Do you recognize that there was some kind of affront or injury or something like that? Can you verbalize what happened from your perspective? Because others, the person is affected, they can't really verbalize it. It takes, when you're injured, and I'll say this, when you're fully injured, it is not, it's not easy to jump back, because sometimes you don't even know you're injured. When someone hurts you, you don't even know that you're hurt that way. And it's not till you try to get up and do a particular action that you realize, wait a minute, there's something wrong. Like in marriages. A lot of times marriages, people get divorced and da-da-da, and it's a year or two after divorce happens that people realize that they were going through some kind of trauma. They were injured. And it's 2 years later, it's a year later, you're not going to get that apology. And sometimes that strain or that hurt is there. And we're all rational people. We take it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we say, hey, forgive me. We'll be the people to say, ask for forgiveness. You were the one that were wrong. And I think, that's a beautiful thing. But I think sometimes we have to get to the fact that those feelings that we have, the relationships that we did have, Allah is telling you something. And maybe that's the takeaway. Maybe you're not supposed to be in that situation at a particular time. Maybe you're not supposed to be in love with that person at a particular time. Maybe you shouldn't have loaned that money to that person at a particular time. Or maybe you shouldn't have been whatever. It's a plethora of things you could think about. But the concept of forgiveness is to me, I think it's one of the most profound things in the world. Because we really don't understand it. We want to understand it. We don't understand it. It's not an absolute. And so as we get to our 24th minute here, you guys know I don't do a long show. Why? Because you guys got places to go, things to do, and you have opportunity in your life to be positive and grow yourself. So I'm not going to take up a whole hour. This is ridiculous. But I will say this. The next time someone comes to you for forgiveness, break it down. Break it down. Have you talked to God? Y'all good? Are you ready to talk to me so we can be good? Have you learned that it's unacceptable? It was unacceptable then, unacceptable now, it's unacceptable in the future. But it's unacceptable, period. And I want you to move away from that behavior. Listen, we're not perfect. We all make mistakes. We try and be the best people we could be at a particular situation. That's life. Everybody, myself included, has a Jeremy Clark. I'm not talking about a man in prison, but somebody we want to say, hey, listen, can you forgive me for that? Can we find in ourselves that fifth grade kid talking to our adult selves saying, forgive yourself? That's it for the show today. You guys have been great. Thank you so much, man. Ramadan is just zooming by, and I think doing the shout out show has been cathartic for me, connecting with people I haven't connected with, talking through some of the issues. All shows aren't funny. But sometimes talking about things, that's the lightness, that's the levity. We can have a smile. I hope in this regard that I've been able to do that with you and continue to be a servant for you. And inshallah, you come back to the show and the show continues after Ramadan and we just be people, man. Love y'all. I got to go. I got a paper to do. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Figure yourself.